Okay, doke. Howdy, everyone. Good day, good new semester, summer session. I want to talk to you about COM 404, Principles of Persuasion. This class will be kicking off in the second summer session, 2026 here, and will run for 5 weeks. So that's going to move quickly. I wanted to just quickly cover, in about 15 to 20 minutes, cover the broad sort of sweep of the class, the assignments, the structure of things, and specifically want to talk about this business of contract grading, which I've adopted in the last few semesters. So yes, this is Principles of Persuasion. I'm Donovan Conley. Hello. I'm an associate professor of rhetoric in the department, and I've been here for many, many years. I got here in 2004. And I teach classes in rhetoric, and my interest is in like food and taste and ecology type stuff. But in terms of most of my courses, it's persuasion, it's the rhetorical tradition. I also teach a class on language and thought, sort of core stuff in our discipline here. Now, this class, Principles of Persuasion, I started teaching not too long ago. Dr. Bloomfield used to teach this, and then she went on leave, and I picked it up, and I've kind of been doing it more frequently since then. And I enjoy this class quite a bit, and I have tried to structure it in a way that sort of honors a lot of the sort of basic stuff, but also moves into my more particular interests in rhetorical influences that come at us in ways that we might not normally expect. And so I'll let you read through the course overview, but I'll draw attention to the second page of the syllabus where the content units are listed, and then we'll move into the assignments, right? So the class is structured around 5 content units, which perfectly lines up with a 5-week class. So every week is a new unit of content with its own focus and emphasis. And the basic idea of the class is my sort of theory about persuasion in our contemporary lives is that it's kind of gone underground. It's kind of moved invisible, and we're dealing less with persuasion and more with kind of move and influence and low-level kind of forces nudging us around in different directions. Whereas persuasion is very much this process of like, I see you, you see me, I know that you are trying to persuade me, whether you is a person or an advertisement or a politician or something like that. But like, I can see the persuasion kind of in front of me. It's above the level of consciousness, right? So persuasion sort of traditionally or concretely is deliberate. It's sort of conscious. It's, we are aware of it happening. We sort of submit ourselves to it to some degree. So we're starting off, the first unit is on basic principles. We just kind of cover some of the more dominant theories of persuasion: reasoned action, elaboration, likelihood, social judgment, and a few others. And I sneak some Aristotle in there as important background. He is the kind of the father of persuasion theory in the West, going back to the ancient context. If you're in my 409 class, we're going to get more of that perspective. Just a little taste of Aristotle in that first week. And then we move into what I'm calling formal and explicit persuasion. This is what we tend to think of as persuasion as such, right? It's politicians, it's campaigns, it's right in front of us. This is me trying to persuade you kind of idea. The third unit, the third week, we move into semi-formal and suggestive, and there we talk about media and narratives. You don't often think of as a narrative as a sort of deliberately persuasive phenomenon, but sure enough, narratives do a lot of persuasive work, a lot of suasory work, and obviously media and framing, this kind of stuff. So now we're moving into less about persuasion and more about suasion, which is really just about kind of think about the word suave. He's so suave, right? So it's about movement, right? So persuasion is more about deliberate attempts to persuade, often through language explicitly. And specifically, suasion or suave is more about moving, right? So we're just moving and we are being moved. And I'm very interested in this phenomenon and how people, bodies, minds, thoughts, identities, positions, attitudes are moved through different sources and different mediums and technologies. And so we're starting to move into that more so in the middle part in week 3. In week 4, we move into informal and implicit persuasion. And that's, I think, when we're looking at Burke and we're looking at Burke on form. We're looking at Lakoff on framing, how things are framed can often move things one way or the other. And this business of affordances, which has a lot to do with the built environments that we inhabit and how even the physical world is kind of moves us around in very specific ways. There was a documentary, a really interesting documentary on Banksy the artist going back probably well over a decade at this point. It's called Exit Through the Gift Shop. And it's kind of about like that tension between art and commerce and this idea of like you go to a Disneyland or you go to a museum and you go experience these fun rides and you can't get out of the ride unless you go through a gift shop, right? I can think of, what does that mean? It's about forcing you to kind of compelling you to buy things or compelling you to get excited. You just had this exciting experience. Now let's cash in by like putting them in front of all of these gadgets and gizmos and everything. Airports will oftentimes do this. You go up in a set of escalators in order to get to your gate, and at the very top of the escalators, you got to walk through the duty-free shop. It's like here's all the chocolates and the perfume and the cigarettes and the booze, right? It's interesting, these design choices that are very much meant to move and sway you, and so I'm fascinated by that. So that's 4, and then 5 is where we get into like the digital algorithmic type stuff. So this business of like, are we persuading or are we just predicting? This is a larger project that I'm working on. Is this idea of persuasion being replaced by prediction? If I get enough data about what you're likely to do, then I can actually predict your next move and I can beat you to it. I can make it happen, kind of thing. It's almost like witchcraft. It's really interesting. So that's the sort of the arc of the class. We're starting with very kind of classical ideas of persuasion and then ending off in sort of subterranean, low-level, barely conscious, and yet still very forceful and kind of pushing us around ideas of persuasion. So that's the structure of the class. Now I'll talk about the assignments. I have adopted a contract grading system for my classes, and this just started in the spring, actually. It's a big move. It's a big sort of transformation of all of my classes and how they're delivered online and how they're constructed, how the assignments are constructed. But I'm pretty happy with it so far, and I think students are responding pretty well. And the idea of contract grading is to let us all kind of off the hook in terms of, where you're at in life or where you're at in this semester. What I tend to find is increasingly, going back 10 years or so, I didn't have as many, discussions of life eruptions. Life's just a lot more chaotic today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And so oftentimes students will enter a semester and they'll think, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to get the A, and then illness or someone gets fired or, some unexpected, unpleasant scenario erupts and now I can't do as much. And so the idea of the class is for you to be able to kind of try to map your effort with your sort of life circumstances and make some choices, right? So there's some good parts for you and some parts that require some give and take here, right? So the good part is that there's a lot of flexibility in the contract grading. And the downside is that you've got you're accountable for what you actually do or don't do. Okay, so start with the quizzes. There are 5 quizzes in this class corresponding with each unit, and they happen on Sunday. So at the end of each week on a Sunday, or I actually open the quizzes on Fridays, so you have a couple of days to take the quiz. And everyone must take all quizzes, regardless of whatever contract you're going for. Everyone's going to have to do all the quizzes, and you are also expected to get 9 out of 10. However, you can take them as many times as you want. So I think of these more as like assignments / homework opportunities where I'm encouraging you to interact with the materials, with the readings, to understand the questions, to go find the answer, to try to figure out why it is the answer that it is, and to do that enough times where you get the 9. Maybe you get the 9 right out of the gate. Awesome, you're done. Maybe it takes you a couple of times. I have found that when I look through the efforts, there's a lot of students who do take the quiz a few times, which I think is great. I hope you are learning along the way, okay? So that's the baseline. Everyone does all the quizzes regardless of the contract, and you need to do them all, and you need to get 9 out of 10, but you can do them repeatedly. Now, beyond that, there's 4 major assignments in this class, and the contracts are about choosing which and how many of those major assignments. Now, to get an A, you don't even have to do all 4. You just need to do 3. To get the B, 2 assignments. To get the C, just 1 major assignment and the quizzes. Again, all contracts must do all quizzes. The major assignments are where the contracts kick in terms of the differences there. So, you can see there's the persuasive appeal analysis, there's a campaign strategy memo, there's a persuasive ecosystem map, and there is a collaborative frame analysis. Those are the 4 major assignments. If you want the A, choose 3. Doesn't matter which 3, doesn't matter when you do them. If you want to skip the first one, then you're doing the next 3, right? If you happen to miss one, you can, but you got to do all the other 3. So if you want the A, you got to do 3. And you got to do them in the time frame. So all assignments, including quizzes, are opened up on Fridays, and then the deadline is Sunday, but I quietly leave them open till Tuesday. So you have 5 days to complete that assignment, whether it's the quizzes or the major assignments. I feel like that's extremely flexible and lenient. That gives you a good window, but once that window is closed, it is closed. You cannot ask me to accept late work. I give you 5 days to get it done. Beyond that, if you miss it, you're down to the next contract. So that's one of the trade-offs of this system, is no late work. But beyond that, I think you get a good amount of flexibility and a good amount of options, right? So if you're happy to get a B, or maybe you're in a scenario where I don't think I have the time to do all 3 assignments, but I can definitely get this one done and I can definitely get that one done, then great, you can still get a B, okay? So that's the kind of the basic structure of the contract grading. Now, the important part here is the completion standards, and this kicks in. I hate it when an important part starts at the very end of the page here. Page 3 at the bottom, assignment completion standards. Now, there are no grades on these assignments. You get complete or you get incomplete, right? Now, in order to get complete, you must be very attentive to the completion standards for every assignment. This is like super flashing red light, super important, horns going off. Completion standards are what matter here, right? So they are listed in the syllabus, and then I list them again at the bottom of the descriptions of the assignments in Canvas. In the Canvas assignment description, I actually list them as a checklist, and I include I statements. So it's, I did this, check. I did this, check. And if you've done all of those completion checklist items, and if you've done them correctly, then you pass the assignment, then you win the assignment, then you get the whatever, you go on, you're done, you get that assignment to count, okay? So I've listed them, all of the completion standards here. So like if you look on the 4th page for the persuasive appeals analysis, you must have an appropriate text selection. So that's an item that you must do correctly. You must do the rhetorical appeal analysis. You must apply some theory, right? You must have some depth to your analysis. Some evaluation where you're actually reflecting on your analysis, and the professional presentation. Don't forget this one, okay? I'm being a stickler for works cited in this class, in this semester, because I'm not getting works cited the way that I should in previous semesters, and I feel like that is part and parcel of this whole new era, AI era that we live in, which is I don't need to have the readings nearby. AI knows the readings. It can do it for me. I really want to push you guys to engage with the readings, to print them off, to have them physically in your presence. I love getting pens and marking up. I love marking up books. I love circling things and underlining things. When I flip back through, I know where to go. I know what's important, right? So that's why I want to see those references, those sources in your works cited. Works cited is super important, and it will matter. If they're not in there, then it's not a completed assignment. So please follow this. But again, it's just a checklist. If you follow the checklist and if you're doing everything that is stated in the completion standards, you will win that assignment. You will pass the assignment. That's the main thing with these the contract grading and the complete incomplete. It's not about A, B, C level work anymore. I'm pitching this probably at a B plus or A minus level for everyone, right? So the difference between the sort of the A student and the C student is not that the A student is doing better work necessarily. They're just doing more of it. But everyone is being asked to do this level, okay? So you're doing this level 1 time, 2 times, or 3 times, but everyone is sort of clearing the same bar. And again, it's not an A plus bar, but it's not a C minus bar either. You're going to have to do a decent amount of work in order to get the completion standards. But I think that's still fair, right? You get to choose how many, you get to choose when, but you got to clear the bar. And the bar is spelled out very explicitly for you. I'm noticing the page 5 here is not looking too good, at least on my printout. So, again, 4 assignments, you choose 3. Everyone does all quizzes, 9 out of 10. Make sure you very, very closely follow the completion standards. If you do that, my friends, I think you are going to be in great shape. There's a, the revision business, yes. If you are missing just 1 or 2 little elements, if it's close but not quite there, you may be asked to revise. You might not get a full incomplete. If you miss 4 or 5 of the completion standards, you're just going to get an incomplete, right? But if you're close, you can revise it. Just go do the thing. Just add that one missing piece, and then you can get the revision and get it completed. All right? So in the readings list here in the schedule, I have tried to make the readings as unpainful as possible. There's the core, read closely readings, and then there's the like for Aristotle in the first unit. I would love for everyone to read Aristotle closely because he's super important, but at this point it's probably more background, useful kind of stuff. There's still going to be quiz questions on it, but it's less urgent in terms of like what you focus on. But you know, those initial theories like elaboration likelihood is really important, social judgment is really important, cognitive dissonance, these are pretty important basic persuasive theories of how persuasion works and what it struggles with and so on and so on. So I've gotten rid of some readings from last time, but I feel like these ones are the crucial ones, and you should be able to do it just fine. So I have lecture videos, YouTube videos corresponding with the readings. I have reading notes corresponding with the readings. So you have a lot of help. I would say the main sort of path to success in this class is to keep up with the readings, to be organized, to know what assignments you're doing and when you're doing them, to give yourself enough time. I am not checking out of this class. I'm always available. The one thing that bums me out the most about online remote teaching and learning is the lack of interaction, like substantive conversational interaction with students about readings and about ideas. I get a lot of interactions about assignments and mechanics and formats and can you open this back up and so on, but I'd love talking with students about ideas and concepts in particular. And so I'm always happy to chat with you. If you reach out before an assignment is due to say, hey, I had some questions about how to approach this, or can I just run something by you? I love that. Please do that. I'm here. I'm around. So do reach out, and you can also set up an appointment. I'm really flexible. I'll be around. I'm actually heading to Montreal for my birthday. My birthday is the same day as the last assignment is due, July 12th. And I'm actually going to be in Montreal for that. But I'll obviously still be around and available. I'll be doing the final grading and all that. But before that, I'll be here. I'm just doing my usual work, and happy to chat. So I think I'm going long a bit here. No, I'm okay, under 20 minutes. I think that's about it. I can't think of anything else that I've missed that's too important here. Otherwise, you're happy, feel free to reach out, send an email, or shoot me a message of some kind. And I'm wishing everyone well. I hope you enjoy the class. I hope it goes well for you. I hope everything kind of makes sense. And if not, we'll chat. All right. So peace, good luck, and see you on the boards.